Lovely. Yeah, I'll send that through. It'll probably be tomorrow morning, but I'll get that through to you all afterwards. Okay. Okay, it's just 7. I'll just give it another minute and then we'll get started. So what I'll do is in a few minutes, I'll just turn all the microphones off just while I'll sort of talk through the presentation, and then should be plenty of time for any sort of questions, comments, ideas and tips that you can share with each other as well towards the end, and we'll aim for around half an hour. You're welcome to keep your cameras on if you want to, or turn them off, whatever you're comfortable with. It's absolutely fine. Okay. So I'm going to start. We might have some people join us, but I'm going to crack on, get started. I'll let people in as they arrive. So welcome everybody. Thanks ever so much for joining me this evening. So I've just put together a presentation around children and mental health, which I think is really important at the moment. And we've got a whole range of people on the call tonight. So some people who are parents, some who are educators or work with children in some capacity, or supporting children or caregivers. So lots of different roles for people that are here tonight. So everybody's really welcome, and I'm trying to give an overall view that hopefully is helpful to you, whatever your capacity is in working with children. Okay, so just 1 second. All right, so I just wanted to give a bit of a context to where I'm coming from. So I'm an occupational therapist. I know some of you haven't met me before, but I've been an occupational therapist for nearly 20 years. And the approach that I tend to use along with my occupational therapist skills is a solution-focused approach, which is very practical, kind of acknowledging the problems, but working towards the solutions to the problems. Hold on, my screen's frozen up. There we go. I also use a lot of mindfulness techniques and strategies and tools in the solutions that I've worked with people for. And obviously my experience as an occupational therapist and as a health professional as well comes into some of the advice that I'm sharing this evening. So I wanted to give that as a perspective, because I guess there are lots of different ways that we can approach working with children and children's mental health. And some people would come from a more counselling approach or psychologist. So I just like to make it clear as to where my background is and where I'm coming from, so that you can take from it what you want to really and what works for you and the children that you're with. And I've also done a lot of kind of work and research around compassion, and that's a big part of the way that I operate as well, as a professional and I hope as a personal approach as well, but having that compassion and empathy for people's experiences. Okay. So I thought it's kind of useful for us to get a bit of a context and think about where the child's coming from, and a few things for us to consider really when we're thinking about the mental health of children. So obviously children are developing, aren't they? Every child is unique, and some of you might be working with children with learning differences or neurodiversity, but also all children are developing at different phases in terms of awareness of their feelings and their emotions. And sometimes it can be quite difficult to process information for children because there can be lots coming in. It can be quite overwhelming. So if we can try to consider that in terms of how we're communicating. I guess for a child, and especially at the moment, things can feel really out of control. There's lots of things happening. We're being told to do or not do lots of things. And it feels out of control for adults, doesn't it? And we've got a little bit more, whereas for children, we're quite actively telling them things. And the other thing that children are going through, if we're talking about that kind of primary age as well, is trying to understand who they are, trying to understand what they're feeling and what to expect when they're interacting with others. So lots of learning going on and development through that primary age. Also for a lot of children, there are life events that have happened from birth to where they are, whatever age they may be, and so they're going to be really influential as well in their experiences. Okay, so if we're thinking about some of the challenges a child might have in terms of their mental health, it could be really hard for them to understand and verbalise their thoughts, emotions and feelings, because it can feel quite scary, can't it, sometimes, when we can feel that as adults as well. So for a child, some of the things that might be happening to them can feel really uncomfortable and different. And I guess for some children there'll be some learned behaviours around that as well, in terms of how they respond or react when they feel a particular emotion, and what response they get from other people as well, from the adults around them, as well as their family and their siblings. And also there's lots of changes going on within the body as well, and as you know, a lot of us are aware, the feelings and the emotions that we might get that feel like they're in the mind actually feel really within the body. So we often get things like butterflies in the tummy, or heart rate increase, or feeling breathless, or feeling a bit weird and wobbly, and a lot of that's happening in the body. So for a child, that can feel sometimes like it's a physical problem, and that can be a challenge for them to learn how to respond to that and to experience those things. Okay, so one of the kind of key things from my perspective that I've worked with children, so I've done a lot of working with children in schools and in different organisations, and the key thing that I work with so much is anxiety. So I thought I'd sort of do a bit of a slant along anxiety, because I think that's quite prevalent at the moment for lots of young people. Just wanted to show you this iceberg. So some of you may have seen this before, and it kind of depicts what anxiety can sometimes look like as opposed to how it feels. So on the top, we've often got a lot of the behaviours that come out from a child. So sometimes children are angry, or they're fighting going to sleep, or struggling to sleep, or they can't concentrate and focus, or they're quite defiant against things, or avoidant. And often that behaviour can be based in something else. So that's the stuff underneath the surface that we don't necessarily know about, and the child might struggle to articulate or know that that's what's going on. So there's all this other stuff going on, but often what we will see is the stuff on the top, really. And that's the same, I guess, if a child isn't anxious, you might see the more calm, collected behaviours. Okay, so these are some of the common things in terms of a child that might be anxious that shows up as something else. So it's another way of looking at the iceberg, really, but sometimes these things are what we're seeing as parents or teachers or caregivers, educators on the outside. And that can be quite difficult, can't it? Because we're having to cope with this at the moment, particularly those that have got children at home who might be coping with some of these behaviours or seeing more of them. I'm certainly seeing in my daughter a lot of babyish behaviour. She's 9 and she's behaving quite a lot younger than she has done before, and I think some of that is her wanting us to give her a bit more attention, because we're both working from home as well as looking after her. And I think so that we've seen some real changes in her behaviour the last couple of weeks, where I think she's feeling quite lost and worried about what's going on. So if she behaves a bit more like a baby, I think she feels she'll get a bit more attention and love and care that a younger child might need. So sometimes some of the behaviours that we're seeing could be based in anxiety. And when I talk about anxiety, because a child feels anxious doesn't necessarily mean they've got an anxiety disorder, but they might just be feeling anxious, worried about something underneath. Okay, I've also just slotted a little thing in around grief, because I think at the moment it's really important to acknowledge changes that are going on, and for a lot of children, young people and adults, there's a lot of loss going on. And I'm not just talking about bereavements and health anxieties, I'm talking about the things that were our lives before. So things like a normal routine that a child may have lost, going to school. They may have lost some of their normal friendships and relationships, or family members who are often around, the clubs, activities, the other adults that influence them. And a lot of that kind of changed. And other things, wider things as well, contact with parents who maybe not live together. There's lots of change going on, isn't there? And I think the grief side of things and the loss because of that change and not having those things anymore could be really common for lots of children. So there's no right or wrong way to feel about it. Grief can present in lots and lots of different ways, can't it? But I was just thinking there's another thing to think about when we're thinking about the mental health of our children. There could be some element of loss for some of them at the moment. Okay. think also just thinking about the primary children. I don't know whether any of you are working with or live with children in year 6 who would have been maybe moving on from primary school at the end of this school year. So our school phoned us today, and they were quite positive that they felt that children would be back before the summer holidays. But I think there was certainly a couple of weeks ago a thing around some of those children won't leave and end primary school in the way that they would. So and that can feel like a real loss, and that rite of passage of moving on from primary school. Okay, so I've just put together a few tips in terms of talking and supporting children and thinking about their mental health and their well-being. So I think first and foremost, we have to be really conscious of our behaviours and our tone of voice and body language. And I'm not saying we're all, it's got to be perfect, it's not, but I think if we're conscious of how we're speaking and staying calm and our body language when we want to talk about things with the child, that can really, really help. Okay, so a few tips. So first of all, just asking a child how they feel, and they might not know and they might not be able to answer that question, but having conversations around feelings and how they are, and it may be that you share how you're feeling first, can be really, really helpful. Asking directly and helping them to kind of connect with their feelings and emotions. As parents, teachers, carers, educators, our natural response often, if a child says I'm really scared, or I don't like this, or I'm angry, or whatever that feeling is, our natural thing is to try and fix it, take it away, protect them, get rid of this because it's not nice, and we want you to be happy and lovely. And actually what we're doing by doing that sometimes is saying, sometimes we counteract it, there's nothing to be scared of, don't worry, don't be silly, nothing to be scared of, it's all okay. And we're doing that, it's coming from the right part of us because we want to look after them. But actually part of what we're saying with that is that you're wrong and you shouldn't feel like that, and that's not okay. And for a child then, that they might feel like you're not sort of with them and there's something wrong about the way that they feel. So I guess try not to fix it and just let them tell you what it is and encourage them to share that, rather than trying to make it go away and make it better straight away, because we can't do that. So try not to fix it and try to stay with them, not against them. So instead of often we can feel like saying things like it's okay, it's all going to be fine and you're safe and it's okay, just try and stay with them and maybe saying things like, I understand that this can feel a bit scary and that's okay, and I'm here with you. It might be helpful to share how you feel, so depending on the situation, the child and all of that, but to say, sometimes I feel a bit scared, or I could feel a bit worried about these things, and opening up that it's normal to feel this way about whatever it may be, not just coronavirus, whatever it might be, can help that child to connect a little bit and think, oh, okay, so adults can feel a bit like that as well sometimes. And maybe doing some work around finding the words. So again, I'll use the example of being scared, but if a child might be refusing to go somewhere or do something, or being angry or throwing things about, or not behaving in a way that you might want them to, and maybe saying, are you feeling scared, or what's happening, what are you thinking, maybe getting some language, whether you then use the word scared or wobbly or butterflies or whatever the words are, helping them to find some words to be able to explain it can be really useful. And talking about what's happening can also really help that child. I think sometimes the word anxious can be a bit complicated and a bit almost, this may be just me, my opinion, but sometimes I think it can feel a bit medical and a bit like we're diagnosing, and maybe for a child another word would be better. The children that you're with and what would work, but trying to give them some words is really helpful. But talking about things, trying not to shy away from stuff as hard as it can be. And if you're finding things emotional and you think, actually, I don't think this is helpful, who could they talk to? Are there other people around? It doesn't have to be just you. Are there other people? Siblings, family members, teachers, other people that might be able to have those conversations. Okay, so just putting a little bit about coronavirus, because obviously we need to find ways to be able to support our children and talk to them. And key guidance really is around being open and honest, but using the facts and reliable sources, so that we've got some clear information to give that child, and I guess not telling them untruths. They don't need to know the whole details of things, but just some clear facts can be helpful. Trying to stay calm and to answer their questions, but equally don't worry if you don't have all the answers. We're not going to know everything. We can try and find out, but I guess it's trying to have contained, manageable, understandable conversations with the child. I've been speaking to some parents recently who feel their children are really struggling with it and becoming really super highly anxious about their health and safety and of everybody else's as well. And so trying to give some time for that conversation, but boundaries, so it doesn't become a big thing all the time. Maybe limiting input of news and that kind of thing can be helpful. We've been watching News Round each day because they tailor I guess they will always feature coronavirus, but they will also feature other things as well. And they have a section called Happy News, and that's quite helpful in terms of bringing out there is still happy stuff going on, but also they explain the situation in a way that's helpful to children, maybe sort of older primary children, but it does seem to be working. Okay, so reassurance where we can. I think it's quite helpful saying we're safe and secure at home, but obviously I think some of you are key workers and going out to work as well, or we have to go to do our shopping or whatever it may be, so we don't want children to be scared of the outside world, but we also want to reassure them that there are things in place to keep us all safe in the outside world, and it's still okay to leave the front door and go and do that exercise in a way that's helpful. So I guess we want to try and encourage them to do that. I'm saying that because I've spoken to a parent recently whose child's now refusing to leave the house because they're so worried about their safety going out. So we talked about pacing that and really slowly just sort of standing, maybe just opening the window, a bit at the window, and then gradually maybe going to the front door and moving out and going slowly. So I'm trying not to avoid these things, but trying not to be confrontational, I guess. And that's where the compassion side of it comes in for me, is that we if we can try to stand with the child and work out the ways that will be helpful. For younger children, I think stories can be really useful, and I've got on the next page some links to some really nice stories that explain coronavirus in a really helpful way. They're age dependent, but sometimes a story can be great. Or maybe using pictures or words depending on your child, really, or the children that you're with. Pictures or particular words can be really useful to visualize things rather than just explaining stuff. So there are some great stories at the moment. So I've just put some links on to some here. The ELSA support website, I've got loads of free downloads at the moment, and that's the picture at the bottom of the screen, the coronavirus story there. There's also one that's written with illustrations from the artist who did the Gruffalo or the Julia MacDonald books, Actor Schiffler. There's a storybook by them that's free to download as well. I also found one called Lucy's in Lockdown, and that's around mood, and that's a really nice story as well. So there's a few more, but I thought you can click on the links, have a read through, see what you think might be helpful for your child. They're all different, they've got different ways of explaining things. Okay, so the other thing that I think is quite helpful is thinking about, so if we want to support a child and supporting their mental health and well-being, stopping and having a big chat, if you like, might feel too much and feel too heavy, and it makes things bigger than they need to be. So it's trying to get conversations going in everyday life. So I've just put a few activities out that might give you an opportunity to be able to talk about how a child might be thinking and feeling. It's actually within a game or something like that. So maybe playing a game can be useful, and I'll put some links on the next page as well. Getting creative, so things like making a worry monster, where we try to separate ourselves from the worry and see that's something else and separate that we can put away. Going on things like mindful walks, so if you are able to go out at the moment and do some outdoor exercise, making those walks a bit more mindful, so noticing colours, sounds, textures, smells, those kind of things, maybe picking a colour each or something like that. Some short meditations can be really useful for children as well, to find some calm, particularly if they're feeling agitated, angry, but meditation is helpful even if you are feeling calm. It can be really useful skill to have. Something like charades, so acting out things, or particular emotions, or especially we're trying to develop the child's understanding of feelings and emotions. Or something like cosmic yoga is on YouTube. You can do some yoga moves which are really, really helpful, and they're based around characters and stories. I've just put a couple of things on here. So I've got these from Elsa Support website, and there are some things that you can pay for on there, but they've got a whole load of free resources now. If you click on the coronavirus link, they've got lots of different things. And so I thought the certificates are really nice to praise and reward a child for being so brave, and the changes they're going through and managing really well. Or some ideas there around signing a worry monster, and there's a game there where you can roll the dice and play a few things, but there's loads of stuff on there, so you could have a look if you wanted to after today and just see what you think might work for the children that you're aiming for. And I've also put on this little wellbeing calendar as well, so that I often share the ones from Action for Happiness for adults, but this is actually one for a child, and there are different things for different days in April. You don't have to do it all in order, but just a few ideas of positive things that a child might do, and being just a bit more aware of their mental health and well-being, and being able to have a little activity to do around that. I've also got, I'm just going to show you on the camera here, a couple of things that I have here that I use. There's something here called Mindful Kids, and this is a box of different activities. I'm just going to show you a couple. There's 50 activity cards in here, but they're really lovely, and they're really nice illustrations and different activities you can do. So that's one around sort of sending love to the people that you love that you might not see at the moment. There's one that's called I Am Thankful, so thinking about gratitude and the things that you're really thankful for, but it explains it all really nicely in different ways, and I mean they're available on Amazon, but they're quite nice little activity cards to do. And then I've just got another couple of books that could be quite nice. You don't have to be a therapist to be doing any of this. These are just really kind of straightforward ways. There's one there called the Unworry book, which has lots of different activities, and mainly perhaps for slightly older primary age, but lots of different things to help boost self-esteem, self-value, confidence. And one there called No Worries as well that I used. Certainly those books can be really good activity books for a child to bring in, especially you know, coming to the end of the Easter holidays, and if you put together a timetable for your child for the next couple of weeks during daytime, then you might be able to bring some of that in, depending on what you can get hold of. But even just downloading some of the activities from different places can be just part of what you're doing day to day to make conversations as normal as possible. Okay, so that's as much as I wanted to say. So just a bit of an overview and introduction, a few ideas to think about different ways that we might support a child at the moment. So I wanted to kind of open it up to you really to see if there's anything that anybody wanted to ask about or share in terms of things that you know of, or supporter ideas, or any comments. You're welcome to either pop your mics on, or there's a chat function as well where you can type things in if you'd rather do that. Okay.
Hi Kate, you're right.
Hello, Gerds. Hi.
Yeah, I was just going to ask a quick one. So you know, at the moment, I think a lot of the adults are struggling at the moment anyway, watching all the news at the moment.
Mm.
We're hearing a lot of things about, you know, people
Yeah.
passing away. They're showing pictures of coffins. You know, a lot of grim things that are happening right now across the world.
Yeah.
What's the best way? Because the kids are watching TV, of course. Yeah, you know, when as adults are watching it.
Yeah.
What's the best approach? Because, you know, they're really young and they're just having to watch these things with the parents or the foster parents, or, you know, even with teachers. And my wife's a teacher, she'll be back to school. You know, what's the best way to sort of go around that?
I think part of it is, from my perspective, and other people may have other suggestions, I think it's limiting things so that we're not avoiding the topic, but also it's not overwhelming and we're not giving too much of that information. So answering questions, I think if children ask about it, especially seeing things like coffins, and maybe answering those questions really clearly and succinctly, but maybe thinking about, are there other things do you want to watch the 10 o'clock news instead of the 6 o'clock news or the afternoon, and change that, or change how you consume news so that it feels a bit more in control, and maybe offering the children chance to sit and talk and share, you know, if they've noticed anything or they've got any questions about anything that's happening at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
I think it's important that when they do go back, because their
Mm.
friends are talking about it, you know,
Yeah.
I think to shed some sort of light, you know, around what's going on is important, I think, for them, even when we're watching it, you know, having a discussion with them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there has to be an element of information, but it's getting it right for that child so it's not really scary and overwhelming and just too much, but equally knowing some things that are happening. I think it depends on your situation as well, because, you know, we're going to have, obviously there's a high number of deaths, so there'll be a lot of children affected by death or people that have been very poorly and have recovered, and it's about supporting them as well.
Hi, Kate. So on that, so my son's 6, and we watch Newsround daily, so he understands that. But equally in the morning, we have BBC News on, and he watches it. But I think he's quite understanding, so he's aware what's happening, and there are people dying. But then he has faced death in kind of our extended family at a young age, so he's quite aware of death. We've kind of he knows about death. It's just in a nicer way that we've said actually people don't live forever. And you know, every time he speaks to people, his ending line is stay home, stay safe. So he knows that actually you need to stay home. So whilst he's 6, I think his understanding's there. So I think he just struggles with kind of being at home and a change of routine rather than, but we don't want to shield him, and we kind of decided actually there's no point shielding him too much. Obviously, I mean, he probably does see the news where there's coffins and stuff, but he hasn't said anything, but he is very aware. And I think like they said that actually when they go back to school, people will still be talking about it. So I guess again it just depends on how much your child is able to comprehend what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're right, because it depends also on the child's other experiences as well. We've had sadly quite a few deaths in our family, so our conversations about death have been a lot more than you know, if it had been 10 years ago, it would have been quite different. So I think it very much depends on the child. You've got to make the call, haven't you? But I think from my perspective, I encourage people not to avoid having conversations and going ahead and trying to protect against it, because it's real. And I think certainly when kids are back at school, there's going to be quite a lot of conversations around it, but equally getting the balance right that feels comfortable for you and for them. So it's making the call for you. Okay. All right, thank you ever so much for asking those questions and comments and sharing some of your support as well. So in summary, I thought be open to talking, as I've just said, and encouraging conversations and all sorts of conversations, balance it, the positive stuff. What's been great about today? What have we done today that we're really proud of? You know, encouraging that stuff, as well as being comfortable to try to address some of the more tricky conversations. Listen and try to not to fix or protect or take away, acknowledge what it is the child might be going through, and trying to say and it's okay, and it will get better and you will feel better. Just be there with them, maybe try out a few activities, have a look at a few things next couple of days and just try out a few things and see what happens if you're with the children right now. The other key thing is around, I think there's something around role modelling in all of this as well, and looking after ourselves, but also looking after your own mental health and well-being, because obviously the stuff that you may be managing as an adult may be pretty tough at the moment as well. So trying to take some time to see what you need, because the better that you are in terms of your own well-being, the more able you'll be able to support others as well. So please, I've done a couple of other webinars around looking after your own mental health and things. Very happy to share them if that would be helpful if you've not seen it. And if you do feel like there is a problem growing for a child, and you feel like it needs a bit more professional guidance or help, or you just want to check something out, seek further support. And I've put some contacts up on following here. So some of the useful links are, I've put a few around coronavirus, different charities that are supporting. But so Young Minds have got a free phone line for parents or teachers or educators, caregivers, that anybody can phone anytime. So if you go into Young Minds, there is a phone line there. So I mean, normally I'd be encouraging also access to GP and you know, where it was appropriate, going to child and adolescent mental health services, but obviously things are quite tough at the moment and services are reduced. But certainly where I'm based in Leicester, and there is a crisis number for child mental health services that's available. But if you don't feel it's at that end of things, then something like Young Mind, if you want some advice, you're welcome to call me and have a chat through things. If I can help in any way, you're really welcome to. But there's lots of resources out there and different support systems. I've also put a little link to Rachel. So Rachel's on your screen if you can see the cameras. Rachel was talking about dyeing her hair earlier. When we first went on the call. So Rachel runs an organisation called Mindful Magic Leicester, and I've put a link to her Facebook page there. So she's doing some online recorded and some live mindfulness sessions for children, teenagers and adults as well. So I've put the link there, so feel free to pop into that and like her page and follow some things that are going on there. Rachel's email address is there as well if you want to speak to her directly. The government have just produced some guidance on supporting children and young people's mental health, and what's brilliant in that guidance is it links to all sorts of additional needs that a child may have, or particular things that have happened in the child's life circumstances. So that link's really helpful, and it breaks things down into all sorts of sections and different situations, so that can be really useful as well. Okay, all right. So I have been running a webinar each week for the last few weeks. I'm doing one later on this evening around supporting older children, secondary age children. I know some of you are joining me for that as well. But next week I'm offering an open forum for anybody who've trained as a mental health first aider, where we're going to just offer some support to mental health first aiders who are also supporting other people thinking about their own mental health, but also any questions they might have about their role. And then I'll have other ones available coming through the end of April and through into May. Okay, so that kind of brings me to the end of the session. There's some contact details there in case anybody wants to get in touch. If you haven't already, you're really welcome to follow my Facebook page. I've been sharing tips and guidance, all sorts of things on there for a long time now, so feel free to do that, or connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to. And I think that's all from me, really. So I'll say thank you all ever so much. Thanks for joining this evening. If you have particular questions, because I'm not able to cover everything, and obviously everyone's situation is unique, you're more than welcome to contact me outside of here if you want to, if I can be of any help. Okay, so thank you all. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
You're off to clap for carers at 8 and for key workers, and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.